Today I'm making a top 10 of the most impactful cards for the 2024 standard format that were released in 2024. If you want to make your own list and leave it in the comments down below, I'm sure our lists will have some differences because after all, this is just an opinion. And if you enjoyed the video today, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content, and you can check out ways to support my content if you wish so in the description down below. So the way I'm going to be making today's list is I'm thinking which cards were played in the most decks and which cards when played in games were the most impactful, which cards were the most impactful in how games are being played out, and also thinking about kind of the overall meta and deck building. Is a card stopping decks from being played, or is a card making decks be played differently? So I'm taking all of that into account today to create this top 10 list of the most impactful cards of 2024 in the Pokemon team. And I'm going to begin with number 10, Area Zero Underdepths. So Area Zero Underdepths came out in Stellar Crown, and it's a stadium that allows you to expand your bench to up to 8 Pokemon as long as you have a Terra Pokemon in play. We've seen this be used in a number of decks, including Terrapagos decks, Loft Terrapagos, and Miraidon. Those are kind of the three big ones, but I've even seen it experimented out of there. You know, you could put it in Raging Bolt, you could put it in Regidrago, you could put it in a Chewy X deck if you're playing something like that. But those three that I named are kind of the place where this card has mostly been seen and has been prevalently been seen. And I think this is a strong card. It didn't impact the game, obviously, as much as numbers 9 through 1, in my opinion, which is why it's only here at number 10. But this card has a lot of time to grow and a lot of time to show its power as well. All of these cards do. They're brand new in 2024. As we go into the next year, we'll see what else they do. But Area Zero Underdepths was impactful because it can fundamentally change the game in a way. It's expanding at least one player's bench to 8, assuming that if you're playing this down, you have a Terra Pokemon in play and you're getting something out of it. But of course, it could expand both players' bench to 8. Now, this changes a lot. So it changes how many support Pokemon you can have on the board. It changes the damage output of some things like Palkia V-Star or Raikou V. We've seen it paired with both of those Pokemon in the decks. So it definitely does change the game, and it changes how decks are built a little bit. You know, the Miraidon deck that's currently around the one Sacramento Regionals, that deck would probably play and look differently without Area Zero Underdepths because Raikou isn't as strong, and then you can't rely on as many support Pokemon. So I really like Area Zero Underdepths because it allows you to go wide with support Pokemon. Latias, play something like Squawk or Lumineon early, play down Fez, Mew EX. Got a lot of room to make sure your deck is consistent and giving you options and letting you take actions, which is a great thing about the Pokemon TCG. So let's move on to number 9, which is going to be another card that is related to Terra Pokemon, and this is Noctowl, also from Stellar Crown. So Noctowl has the ability Jewel Seeker. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve a Pokemon, if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, you can search your deck for 2 trainer cards. Now, a stage 1 Pokemon just evolving, and because it evolved, you get to search for 2 trainer cards. That is an incredibly powerful effect. Looking back to Drizzile and Inteleon from the Sword and Shield sets, those cards, the stage 1 searched for 1 trainer, and then the stage 2 searched for 2. This is a stage 1 Noctowl evolving from Hoot Hoot, and just immediately you get 2 trainer cards as long as you have a Terra Pokemon in play. Now, there are enough strong Terra Pokemon that this allows Noctowl to be really strong as well. Noctowl has been paired in Terrapagos decks, in Palkia Terrapagos decks. We've seen the 1/1 line thrown into a number of successful Regidrago V-Star decks. We've seen Noctowl in a Charizard EX Terrapagos EX deck, kind of that hybrid Charizard Noctowl Terra kind of deck. But Noctowl, I'd say it actually changes games potentially a little less than Area Zero does, but I think it's a stronger card overall because, like I said, it's not every day we see a stage 1 Pokemon that you could just evolve. It's not even an EX, it's not that much of a liability, you just evolve and get 2 trainer cards. That's incredibly powerful. It's not an effect that we see every day, which is what caused me to put it on to number 9 here. Number 8 is going to be Dragapult EX from the Twilight Masquerade set. So Dragapult EX came out right before NAIC this season, and it was expected that Dragapult EX was going to dominate that event. That didn't happen. Gardevoir dominated that event. Lawson Box actually won. You know, I think if we go back and simulate that tournament a bunch of times, that Gardevoir ends up winning more often. But that's a moot point here. We're talking about Dragapult EX. So Dragapult EX, how did this change the game? Well, high HP, no weakness, Terra Pokemon. Now, having that Terra tag didn't really matter too much when Dragapult was released. We didn't have the Area Zero, we didn't have Noctowl, we didn't have the Stellar Crystal Ace-Spec. I always get that card's name wrong. Spoiler alert, it's not on the list today, but Dragapult EX eventually ended up getting more support. But Dragapult EX, why it changes the game so much is the very efficient spread of damage that it does. That 6 damage counters it can place. You know, that can take out a Pidgey. It could take out the 60 HP Charmanders people are playing. It could take out a Ralts. It could set up damage for multiple knockouts in the future. So the big deal here is the Phantom Dive damage spread of 200 active and 6 damage wherever else you like. And then also the high HP, no weakness. Those two things combined made Dragapult EX a very strong card. Now, I think Dragapult EX saw less success on its own than was expected, but it still warped the meta because people were preparing for that damage output that it can do, that the no weakness, high HP tankiness that it had. And I think we were a little over prepared for it when it finally came out in English, because we had, we had seen what it could do from the Japanese results. One, I think it overperformed in Japan because they tend to play newer cards, especially at the new tournaments, similar to how we do at League Cups. They're just not tracked like Japanese City Leagues are. And then 2, it also underperformed here because we were over prepared for it on its release. However, Dragapult EX has been one of the most important pieces of Regidrago V-Star, which has been the best deck for a while now. Regidrago V-Star was the best deck for Worlds in August, and we're just about to end December, and I'd say it's still the best deck and didn't really have any points in there where it wasn't either the best deck or one of the best decks. And Dragapult EX's Phantom Dive is one of the main attacks of that deck. Now, of course, Regidrago V-Star, I'll be talking about it a lot today. I've already talked about it a lot, but Regidrago V-Star itself obviously was not released in 2024, but a good bit of the cards that have been helping it along the way were released in 2024. So we'll be seeing those talked about just because, Regidrago is the best deck. The cards that are being put into there are impacting the game heavily. Another card from Twilight Masquerade is Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. This is going to be number 7 on my list today for the most impactful cards of 2024. Blood Moon Ursaluna EX is an incredibly strong card. If you showed this card to somebody 5 years ago, it would immediately be the best card in the game. Or, 10 years ago, it would look like a fake card. That's how powerful, that's how pushed this card is. This and Charizard EX, in my opinion, are 2 of the most pushed cards based on just raw numbers and what it does when comparing to older cards. But Blood Moon Ursaluna is so impactful because it's a colorless Pokemon that can eventually attack for 0 energy. And that attack that's costing 0 energy because of its ability Seasoned Skill is Blood Moon, which is doing 240 damage. So this can be put into any deck. It's even better if you're playing double turbo energy, or if you're playing counter gain, or if you're playing something that knocks itself out like Dusknoir and Dusclops or Magneton. anything to force your opponent to take prizes so then you can attack even easier. It's just such an efficient attacker, has such high HP, 260 health. Not to mention if you add like a bravery charm to that to put it up to 310, or a hero's cape to put it up to 260, a 360. And that's also one of the reasons why Control has been able to find these pockets of success, is because it really uses Blood Moon Ursaluna EX a lot as a tank and as an attacker. But a multitude of decks use Blood Moon Ursaluna, and a multitude of decks can use Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. So this has impacted the game a lot because decks just have this huge beat stick, high HP, high damage, potentially very, very low energy requirement or even no energy requirement. And it's just something that can happen at any point in any game because it's a very easy card to slot into a variety of decks. And something you always have to be expecting on the other side of the field. And it allows decks to close out games where maybe you wouldn't have been able to close out games prior, and it would have take, you know, 1, 2, 3 more turns to reset up a new Pokemon and knock out, get those final prize cards. But with Blood Moon Ursaluna, it's just a great finisher, and it causes games to end more quickly because you can more consistently get that final hit with the Blood Moon attack. Next is number 6, Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. Now, seeing this at only number 6 might surprise some of you because this card has been incredibly impactful, but that also goes to say how impactful these other cards have been that are ahead of this on the list. So Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, when it was first revealed, you know, looking at that ability, attach a basic grass energy from your hand to this Pokemon and then draw a card. Immediately it reminded me of Celebi Prime from the CMT deck back in 2011. Immediately reminded me of that, and looking at this card and its potential, also being grass type, having energy switch in the format, I knew that this was going to be, you know, a 3 or 4 copy include that becomes the engine for a deck. I didn't know it was going to become that for 2 different decks, being both a staple part of the Raging Bolt Ogerpon deck and of the Regidrago V-Star deck. Now, Raging Bolt and Regidrago V-Star have both been prominent parts of the metagame. So while Teal Mask Ogerpon doesn't exactly change the way we play the game because of it, of course, I guess the Charizard matchup against decks playing Ogerpon, that changes things because it's a really, really efficient grass attacker. So it does keep Charizard at bay sometimes, but this card doesn't exactly change how the game is played based on its attributes. You know, Teal Dance is not exactly a game-changing ability. Myriad Leaf Shower is not exactly a game-changing attack. It does have the Terror Tag that protects it on the bench. It has fine HP. It has Fire Weakness, 1 Retreat. None of its attributes are screaming, this completely changes the game. This impacts an entire year of Pokemon cards. But it is included in decks that have been popular and dominant and very stable pieces of this season's evolving metagame. So Teal Mask Ogerpon, not a very, very game-changing card itself, but it's been the catalyst for 2 very, very strong and very popular decks that have indubitably impacted the metagame and this past calendar year of Pokemon cards. Number 5, Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp was so impactful. It was so indicative of Pokemon TCG standard format as soon as it came out. Just like I was talking about Blood Moon Ursaluna, but to a completely different level. This card is essentially something you had to expect could happen at any point when playing standard format when this came out in Twilight Masquerade. Also, Twilight Masquerade, it included Dragapult, it included Blood Moon, Teal Mask Ogerpon, and Unfair Stamp. Twilight Masquerade might just be the best set of the year for competitive Pokemon cards. But back to Unfair Stamp. So if your opponent took a knockout last turn, you can basically hit them with this overpowered Iono or this overpowered Reset Stamp, Iono and Rocket's Admin, etc. style effect. But you also get to draw cards. So this became, I can disrupt my opponent, but I can have an item-based shuffle draw in my deck. And as somebody who played a lot of Gardevoir this year, I love comeback decks, I love setup decks, I love these cards like Unfair Stamp. It was not only I can disrupt my opponent, it was I can use Arven, I can draw cards, I can play my supporter for turn, and then still have this shot at playing an Unfair Stamp to shuffle and draw 5 more, or start out my turn with Unfair Stamp, draw 5, and then be able to play that Arven or play that Iono that I got off of that shuffle draw 5. So having that item-based shuffle draw 5 at times was better than the fact that it was disrupting my opponent. At other times, it could be used just for, I don't care about any of these 5 cards I'm going to draw, all I need to do is disrupt my opponent. So the fact that this card has essentially 2 effects that are happening here, the opponent shuffles draw 2, you shuffle draw 5, and the fact that I experienced in real tournament games at a high level of play that sometimes only half of the effect even mattered, that should tell you right there how incredibly powerful this card is. And now it's not just an incredibly powerful card, but it also changed the way the game was played, because like I said, you could get disrupted at any point. Your opponent can have this shuffle draw 5 plus a supporter power on that next turn if you knock them out. So there were times when you don't want to knock your opponent out because an Unfair Stamp is coming. Just like we'll get to, spoiler alert, with Pheasantipity EX's Flip the Script, you might not want to knock out a Pokemon because you know they're going to get to draw cards off of it. So Unfair Stamp, incredibly impactful, almost too limiting in choosing your A-Spec slot for a time where it felt like you wanted to either play Unfair Stamp or Prime Catcher, and it was really, really hard to play anything else. But I think we actually have now a really nice selection of different A-Specs across the board going on, more and more as more A-Specs come out, as more decks are built, as the metagame develops, as this format develops. Of course, we're going to have probably about 4 months more of this format. I'm expecting the typical April rotation. 2025. Moving on to number 4. Number 4, what could be better than Unfair Stamp? Well, it's Dusknoir from Shrouded Fable. So I'd say if Twilight Masquerade is one of the best sets of this year, competitively impact, it's between Twilight Masquerade and Shrouded Fable for sure. Which set impacted the standard format this year the most. But looking at Dusknoir here from Shrouded Fable, our number 4 card for today's list, you could also couple Dusclops into it as well. Of course, Dusclops can knock itself out to put 5 damage somewhere. Dusknoir can knock itself out to put 13 damage somewhere. Dusknoir, we saw Henry Brand's Bennett Dusknoir deck at Worlds, and then saw that being played a little bit after Worlds. Very cool combo-oriented deck. Dusknoir, we've seen it in Terrapagos Dusknoir. This card is really, really scary. It absolutely changed how decks are built. It changed how the metagame developed because evolution decks were suffering a little bit because of Dusknoir. People thought Dusknoir was breaking the game or was going to break the game. Definitely changed it. I think kind of the hype and worry around Dusknoir has settled down now from its height a couple of months ago. But Dusknoir, really, really good, especially with the Terrapagos deck that can spread its bench with Area 0 and then use Noctowl to search for the combo pieces. So, you see some of those cards from earlier in the video, Area 0 and Noctowl coming back up because they're catalysts for other strategies and other cards. So being able to control how many prize cards your opponent's at, that could come up with cards like Roxanne, come up with cards like Iono, Counter Catcher, Charizard EX's Burning Darkness attack. Who cares how many prizes your opponent's at? The Briar supporter card. So Dusknoir, again, similar to Unfair Stamp, doing something where sometimes all that matters is that you gave your opponent a prize card so that you can use a more powerful effect. Sometimes what matters is that you put the 13 damage on something. Sometimes it matters both that you're giving your opponent a prize card and you're putting damage on. Similar to Unfair Stamp, but it's not similar to Unfair Stamp. Actually similar to Dragapult EX is that now players were changing their deck lists and the way they play because they know that Dusclops and Dusknoir's cursed blasts are around. Again, heavily impacting the game, changing the way it's played, changing the way some lists are built, and changing the way that the metagame developed this year. Next is Kyurem from Shrouded Fable. Now, Kyurem, not included in a lot of lists, originally thought to just be this kind of Lost Zone box counter, became one of the main attacks of Regidrago V-Star. So Trifrost became so important because off the bat, like I said, Plasma Bane allows you to just slap this down and use Trifrost for 1 if your opponent has Chorus in the discard. Great against Lost Zone, great against anything that's kind of like relying on Chorus's tenacity, which not many decks do. But this also allowed Regidrago V-Star decks to go Prime Catcher, canceling Cologne your Mana Fee, and then Trifrost, knocking out all of your Charmanders or all of your Ralts or all of whatever other basic Pokemon you were trying to evolve up into stronger Pokemon. So Kyurem actually became this monster that was stopping evolution decks from feeling viable. You know, Charizard has to go through so many hoops, play Bravery Charm or Hero's Cave to protect its Pokemon, play Thornton to go back into the Pokemon that were knocked out. And then Gardevoir had a really, really bad matchup against Regidrago V-Star. I think players have gotten that matchup closer and closer and closer as we've progressed through. But Gardevoir was like obliterated at Worlds because of the Regidrago V-Star matchup. But in addition to that, Kyurem has been very, very important to Regidrago V-Star overall. On my winning in at Baltimore, my winning into day 2 of Baltimore, for example, I used Kyurem to secure a 6 prize turn in the Regidrago mirror match. I also did this against a Raging Bolt at some point. So the Trifrost is also incredible versus Cloth Terrapagos, a deck that's currently around. And that's because you can go Trifrost twice, targeting support Pokemon, and take 6 prizes that way. So a really, really, really strong attack that's really only so impactful because Regidrago V-Star exists to copy Dragon attacks. But nonetheless, without Kyurem in the game, I think this entire... ever since Kyurem came out, everything after would have been different if Kyurem was not released, which undoubtedly makes me put it up here at number 3. Next is number 2, which is Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher, the other ace spec that's going to be on our list today, this one from Temporal Forces. Pretty simple effect. You get to gust up one of your opponent's benched Pokemon to the active, then you switch your Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Essentially the effect of the Guzma supporter card, but on an item card. This card has ended countless games and will end an infinite more games in its time in standard format. It's an incredibly powerful effect on an item card, especially in a format where we have very good item search. You know, Arven can just go grab this. The Noctowl that we talked about can just go grab this. Regidrago V-Star's Legacy Star can just grab it out of the discard and use it again. Very, very powerful effect, and not really in a way that's nuanced like some of the other cards we've talked about today. You know, Dusknoir has a lot of reasons why it's good. Dragapult has a lot of reasons why it's good. Prime Catcher is just an innately powerful card that is iconic of the standard format that we've played for this calendar year, in my opinion. And it's definitely going to be impacting the game as we go on as well. Like I said, now I think there's a better variety of ace specs and more reason to play different ace specs, but you can't deny that Prime Catcher is incredibly strong and completely impacted how the game has been played ever since it was released. And the final card today, number 1 on my list, is going to be Pheasantipede EX from Shrouded Fable because of its Flip the Script ability. Once a turn, if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you may draw 3 cards. This is insane because one of the promises Creatures Incorporated gave us about the Scarlet and Violet era was that we would have comebacks. And we saw that through Reversal Energy, Iono, through Unfair Stamp, through Counter Catcher, through Counter Gain. But Pheasantipede, while also theoretically being a comeback card, and might have been why they printed this in the first place, to follow that motif of allowing comebacks to come back into the game, Pheasantipity actually stops comebacks from happening. Allow me to explain here real quickly. So let's say your opponent takes an early prize card lead. They go 2 to 6 prize cards. Well, maybe you just respond by Iono them to 2, knock out their best Pokemon, and they might not be able to respond. However, now with Pheasantipity around, you Iono them to 2, and then they draw their top deck for turn, that's 3, and then they activate Flip the Script, that's 6. It almost feels like your Iono didn't do much of anything, and that's because it probably didn't, because your opponent has this Pheasantipity just sitting on the bench waiting for you to go Iono KO so that they can put themselves back up to 6 cards that way. So this card actually is almost a counter to comebacks. So a strong deck like Raging Bolt can take the lead, and then even if the opponent tries to counter that with Iono or Unfair Stamp, and then knock out the important Pokemon that's ready to go, they have Pheasantipity EX to help them next turn. So this was also what I was talking about earlier with sometimes you won't want to knock out a Pokemon. So in the Regidrago V-Star Mirror match, for example, it can be very popular to gust up the Pheasantipity and hit with Roll Iron, or gust up a Teal Mask and hit with Phantom Dive, and then the next turn go for 4 prizes, knocking out the Fez and the Teal Mask with Phantom Dive. Essentially giving your opponent less opportunities to use Flip the Script, because now there's a negative connotation to knocking out a Pokemon of your opponents because they get to use Flip the Script. So I think Pheasantipity has been an incredibly impactful card in the 2024 standard format because it is in and of itself both a comeback card, but more importantly, it negates comeback cards and allows decks that take an early lead to try their best to keep that early aggressive. So Pheasantipity EX is the #1 card on my list today. So thank you for watching. Let me know what your top 10 most impactful cards for the Pokemon TCG standard format of 2024 were, and how much you disagree or agree with things I talked about here today. If you enjoyed the video, of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content. And if you're interested in becoming a more competitive player yourself, I do offer one-on-one coaching as well as a masterclass, including over 5 hours of educational competitive Pokemon TCG content and teaching. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.